those cultures, those tribes, those communities must respect that here in the Cape, we don't have a tribal kingdom. We have hundreds and hundreds of years of history that is very different to the rest of Africa. We've got a very different cultural belief system, very different cultural makeup, different language, different religious beliefs in many respects, different political beliefs in many respects, different economic models that we pursue.
The Dan Dan Show is all about human stories. And the reason for that is that these human stories give us insight into the knowledge that people have and help inform our decisions and ultimately and hopefully lead to a better understanding of human consciousness. Okay, there we go. Consciousness. Jack Miller, welcome to the Dan Dan Flow.
Donnie, what an absolute pleasure to be here with you. I'm really looking forward to this.
I actually wanted to get you on much earlier, and eventually here you are. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. For those who don't know, Jack is, stop me if I'm wrong about anything, is founder and leader of Cape Independence Party, also known as Cape Exit.
Yes, that's correct.
And that E in the middle for Cape and Exit, there's only one E.
Yes, exactly. There's one E. Some people struggle with it, but yeah, exactly. Similar to Brexit, BRE.
Capexit.
Capexit, yeah. And I think that actually in one of the last elections, it was funny. One of what's that comedian? The guy with the hand.
Jeff
puppet.
Dunham.
Yeah, he said, what is this? Is this some what's the word like Capexit? No, Capexit.
Okay, and so obviously we'll talk about a little bit about your ideas, what led you to starting the party, and all of that, but and a little bit about the economics around it and economic philosophy and libertarianism and all of that. But I think I want to start with you as a human being, and I know that I think before we start going down this avenue, a lot of people get very emotional and very angry and upset when these ideas are floated. Succession is a swear word. But I think it's important to note that in terms of Western civilization and human rights, that freedom of expression, freedom of speech is incredibly important and central to a lot of things. And even if people disagree with you, it's really important that you still be able to say what you say.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's important for us. And I want in this conversation, I want us to be candid. I want you to open. We don't agree about everything, but that doesn't matter. I want to give people an opportunity to understand your thinking, how you got to where you are, and what the real proposition actually is, like what you are proposing. But I want to start sort of school days, growing up. How did Jack Miller become Jack Miller? Like.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that I'm actually really looking forward to this because a lot of the interviews I do are very serious, and I know in your and my discussions before sitting down here today, you really want to approach this from a very different perspective and a personal perspective and get behind some of the philosophy, and so I really look forward to that. There is something you said there, though, that I feel like I need to, maybe that's the political animal in me.
Go ahead.
It's not just freedom of speech. Freedom of speech absolutely is a pivotal part of it. But, the hypocrisy of people on social media, many people, obviously everyone's on social media, but the types of people that say the most outrageous things, that threaten violence against various different people based on their political views, etc. Are we living, first of all, do you believe in democracy? Whoever these people are, do you believe in democracy? Are we living in a democracy? If so, do people have the right to make a political choice, whatever that may be, peacefully, putting an X on a piece of paper in the ballot box? So that is how we solve our problems. If we're gonna say that no, self-determination, secession is off the table, that's not an option, you're not allowing us to put an X on a piece of paper to say that is something we would like to pursue, then you're basically saying democracy does not exist. We're living in a serfdom where you are slaves to be persecuted, and
You're not citizens. You are
slaves.
you're slaves. You're subjects to the
100%.
monarchy.
100%, exactly. So anyone that says, no, you're not allowed to
Talk about this.
talk about it or pursue it or fight for it, obviously peacefully and legally, then those people themselves are de facto admitting that they are fascists, they don't believe in democracy, and in fact, they're telling you you're a slave and you must bow down to the monarchy. So I just wanted to...
I appreciate that, and I tend to agree on a lot of this. The way the civilization, the Western civilization as it's evolved, is something that's dear to my heart, because this is how I grew up and this is how I understand the world and the books that I've read. And if you compare it to other systems, to previous systems, to monarchies and whatever else, just this is the one that maximizes the freedom of the individual. It's a philosophy that essentially says, and it comes out of Christianity, to say that, hold on a second, if we're all equal before God, shouldn't we all be equal before the law?
Yes.
And doesn't that mean if every person is equal, that every person is a king for themselves? That's personal sovereignty. Like you are your own king, and you can make your decisions. And the sort of Miltonian, democratic and areopagitica and whatever, that understanding from what my rudimentary take is that you can do whatever the fuck you want, as long as what you do doesn't impede on other people's ability to do whatever the hell they want to do.
Absolutely.
And so it's such a powerful system, and it's worth fighting for, and you can see in the places in the world where that thrives, the societies thrive. And I said we'll get to the economics and so on, but you can see economically those places, they thrive.
Yes.
They do well.
Yes.
And a rising tide
Lifts all ships.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. The principle of live and let live. I would, however, want to also add to that. I mean, I am 100% on the same page with you in that. What I would like to add to that, though, is that individual freedom and democracy and its roots in Christendom also applies to, I would say, communities that don't necessarily want to pursue that. So, for example, it's not for me or for anyone to go to the Zulu people and say, no, you need to have a Western European style democracy with individual freedoms and rights. Those people have freely chosen, that community, that culture, that tribe have freely chosen. They believe that the Zulu king will look after the best interests of the Zulu people, and they've all chosen to pursue that type of political system. So in many cases, you can see a benevolent monarchy better than a number of corrupt democracies.
It sort of takes us to Lee Kuan Yew and so on, right?
Yeah,
the Singaporean model where you say there's certain freedoms we'll give you, but all of you agree that no, we can't have criminals just running around doing whatever they want. No, we can't have corrupt politicians. If you're a corrupt politician, we put you in jail.
Yes.
If you urinate in an elevator, then you're going to get punished for that.
Yeah.
Because this is antisocial behavior.
Yes.
And we've all agreed that we will not tolerate that.
Yes, exactly. So in your and my, I think, core beliefs in freedom on a basic intrinsic level, similar to that is another individual or a culture of individuals have the freedom to choose whatever political manifestation best suits them. In the case of the Zulus and many other African tribes, that would be a different political system, and that's completely fine, and I respect that, and everyone should respect that. That is the principle of liberty. However, equally so, those cultures, those tribes, those communities must respect that here in the Cape, we don't have a tribal kingdom. We have hundreds and hundreds of years of history that is very different to the rest of Africa. We've got a very different cultural belief system, very different cultural makeup, different language, different religious beliefs in many respects, different political beliefs in many respects, different economic models that we pursue. So these principles are being destroyed under a centralized dictatorial system that frankly was imposed upon us by the British Empire in 1910 to the detriment of everyone who lived within its borders. This was to the benefit of the British and not the people that actually called Southern Africa and South Africa its home. And we saw that change hands from 1910 to 1948. Then you had the northern-based Nats who actually removed colours from the voting roll, and we had the biggest protest we've ever seen in the Cape by Adolf Sailor Malan, who formed the Torch Commandos, who had up to 500,000 white protesters marching on the apartheid government to say, you will not remove colours from the voting roll here in the Cape. Unfortunately, the Transvaal-based Nats stonewalled and forced it through. And then in 1994, the apartheid Nats handed over power to their essential political colleagues in the form of the ANC regime, and we've now had persecution under the ANC regime since 1994. So it's this centralized political system that's such a problem. And
just so for those who don't know, what you're referring to is that pre Second Anglo-Boer War, there was the Transvaal was a republic.
Yes.
The Free State was a republic.
Yes.
Natal. I'm sort of shaky on some of the details on exactly what was considered part of the English, British South Africa and what stood outside of that. But the fact is that it wasn't one country. That unification happened on the British clock.
Absolutely. And in fact, there were well over 20, 30 countries from the 1700s sort of onwards. You had the Swellendam Republic, you had the Graaff-Reinet Republic, you had all sorts of, then you had these tribal, even today we still have the remnants of that, which are very much living countries today. Lesotho is an independent country. Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, is an independent country. And Swaziland,
in our borders,
within the borders of South Africa. I think we must be the only country in the world that have two countries living within our country. So that in itself is, if you just look at that map, it's an artwork telling you that this is not a natural unitary state. We have independent states living within these borders which were forced on us by the British in 1910. So for hundreds and hundreds of years prior to that, you had different cultural groups. And in fact, the Mfecane under Shaka Zulu resulted in the formation of both Lesotho as well as Swaziland. And it even drove some tribes up to Zimbabwe. And in fact, there are problems in Zimbabwe where you have on the east the Shona, and then on the west you have the Matabele. And in fact, there's a strong movement for Matabele land independence. So yes, we're a false country. We never should have been forced into this unitary state. And I suppose to wheel all the way back to your original question.
Finally, I really wondered about this. So you're ever going to get there?
I suppose I eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff, so it's not difficult to get into that train of thought. But I guess I was blessed to grow up in a family that was very politically minded, and so my father was very close friends with someone by the name of Dr. Mario Ambrosini. And Dr. Mario Ambrosini was the right-hand man to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And so my father knew all of these people very well and personally. And he met with P.W. Botha, and he met with Constant Viljoen, and a number of people around that time before the Democratic Party at that point was formed. They were the Progressive Federal Party.
It was a DP, right?
They were DP, yeah, but I think they were PF before that, and then they became DA. So around that time, people didn't really know what the new South Africa would look like. And there was a strong move, and certainly my father being one of them, saying that the unitary state had failed. And the Zulus and the IFP were saying something similar. And so there were a lot of debates as to what the new South Africa should look like. And unfortunately, in the CODESA agreements, you basically had the centrist Nats handing over power to the centrist ANC regime, and we had the worst of all possible scenarios. So I grew up with these conversations around the dinner table. So I guess it was sort of intrinsically in me, and maybe that's part of the reason why I'm fascinated in philosophy and politics and economics. And I studied philosophy at UCT, and also classical history. And there's something that I wanted to talk about today because I don't really get opportunities like this in other platforms. But there are so many reasons why the Cape should be an independent country. And yes, I guess everyone knows the political reasons, they know the economic reasons, they know the cultural reasons, they know the historical reasons. But there's...
I think we can actually sort of go back to those and highlight some of them. But
Yeah, absolutely. But, a lot of people that arrive in Cape Town today, they go like, wow, look at this place. It's so beautiful, it's so much better than Durban, or it's so much better than Joburg, or so much better than wherever else in South Africa they've come from, even other parts of the world. But, having grown up here as a little kid, I remember my parents would, we would drive down, through Hart Bay, and we'd go down to the beach, we'd picnic on the beach and things like that. And there were no squatter camps. You didn't have people, you could walk around safely at night. There was no pollution and rubbish. There wasn't sewage overflowing in the streets. The economy was strong. I mean, when I was a kid, the rand was almost as strong as the dollar. It was a very, very different place to what it is now. And people arriving, they go like, wow, Cape Town's so amazing. But for someone who's lived here for, 40 plus years, and you can see how much we've deteriorated, it's absolutely heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. But I can also appreciate people that don't understand that and aren't aware of the way Cape Town and the Cape used to be. They look at this and they go like, wow, the DA is so amazing. I've met some people that are such stout DA followers, you would swear they believe the DA built Table Mountain. I mean, the DA can do nothing wrong. This place is so amazing. And this is what irritates me about politics.
But I do want to say, I think the DA is doing a much better job at running a municipality than any of the other parties at this point seem to be doing. And say typically, an ANC or an EFF run municipality is probably not going to be great. But what you're saying is the DA does a better job, but it doesn't make them holy. It doesn't make them, what they do isn't perfect. It just looks so much better than the seeming false dichotomy, other choice that we have.
Well, I've got two answers for that question, and it's actually a different answer to what I would have given 5 years ago after getting 2 seats in government and, being in government for the last 5 years and working with the DA, but more often against the DA. Let me first say that when one says the DA, you're actually not talking about a homogenous entity. There are people within the DA that might as well be Cape Independence Party members and Cape Exit supporters that are entirely aligned with what we stand for and what we believe in. And I have very good relationships with many people within the DA.
And then there are also some communists in there and everything in between.
Absolutely. What's concerning is it's the communist faction that seems to, when the chips hit the ground, it's the communist faction that always seems to kind of get their way. And, I've put pressure. I put a lot of pressure on the DA, and then privately I'll speak to people. I'll say, look, what the hell is going on? How can you guys be passing some of these outrageous policies? And the answers I get are interesting, but I don't want to get too deep into that, because from a voting perspective, people need to know, what do they do? And the problem is the DA, and we've said this for years, is ANC light. The DA equals ANC light. So even though there are some very good people in the DA, the party itself, the party that people put an X next to on the ballot box in an election, that party is destroying the Cape and has systematically destroyed the Cape since it's taken almost complete majority control over the last 2 decades.
So, I just want to jump in there. So you say you call the DA ANC light. So from my rudimentary understanding of what we're talking about here, I know that a lot of the ANC during apartheid, a lot of them actually, they were very strongly communist aligned. A lot of them went to the Soviet Union and trained there. And there were some people in exile who went there, and a lot of that thinking seems to have persisted. And I mean, communism's just a name. Like, we can just throw it around, and it can become a little bit like an ad hominem attack. It's just an insult, right? Like calling someone a racist or transphobe, and you don't have to prove anything further now. I've called you the bad thing, so now you're the bad thing. But what does that actually mean?
Okay.
Like, what are the implications of that, and how do you think the DA mirrors some of those kind of behaviors?
Yeah, great. Okay, so first of all, who was the mayor of Cape Town for the longest standing time? Patricia de Lille. Patricia de Lille was ex-PAC, Pan-African Congress. This is so hardcore communist, so it's ridiculous.
It calls for centralized government. It calls for central control of the whole of Africa.
Exactly.
Which is the opposite of, let's say, libertarian sort of localized control. The city-state as a...
The PAC wants a unitary Africa. The EFF wants a unitary Africa. They want a borderless Africa, which is ironic because some of the greatest opponents to Pan-Africanism is the different black tribes. Zulus don't want people coming in from Zimbabwe, Malawi, etc., taking away their jobs. Causes in the Eastern Cape don't want foreigners coming in, taking away their jobs, etc. So it's very ironic that you've got parties like the PAC and EFF essentially wanting one solid unitary African state. So, I mean,
do you think they really want it, or do they just keep shouting that that's what they want, and it sort of creates, because it feels... Because here's the thing about communism, right? If you go through the basics, you say, what we're going to do is we're going to make everyone equal. That sounds nice, right? But the problem is the only way to make everyone equal is to actually make everyone equally poor.
Exactly.
And whoever gets to be in control, and this we've seen play out in many places in the world, those in power, excuse me, those in power become super powerful. Yep. And the rest of the people are just sort of in the wastebasket.
No, communism is the absolutely perfect political system for the elite, for the mercantilists, for massive multinational corporations that want to control everything and have people living in servitude, a slave class. Literally, communism is the perfect system for that, which is so ironic because often the people fighting for it are fighting for it based on the principles
they don't
of
actually know
egalitarians. They don't know what they're fighting for.
It sounds nice. And I think that's what I was saying, like the Pan-Africanist thing, it sounds kind of poetic.
Yes.
Right? Like Gaddafi's idea of the gold dinar, well, the whole of Africa will all share, we'll all be friends.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, but in reality, these things don't play out like that. They sound nice on paper.
Yes, exactly. And I was actually having a conversation with, I guess I can call him a friend, but anyway, someone who's, we rub shoulders in the political circles in the city of Cape Town. And I've told him that he's a communist, and I've tried to get him to see the light. And anyway, so, when there are areas where one can work alongside groups and people like that where there's certain common interests. But anyway, I was attacking the communism that I see within the DA, and he sort of messaged me and said, well, how can you be calling the DA communist? Am I not a communist? And so I said to this individual, I said, well, you clearly haven't read your history properly, because let's look at one of the hallmarks of communism, and it's cannibalism in the full spectrum of the sense, but let's just keep it to the political sense.
It becomes a little bit of a Game of Thrones.
Well, exactly. So what happened to Trotsky and Kirov and I think it was Bukhansky, etc., that the leaders of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, Stalin, ended up executing, assassinating all of his political threats. So within the Communist Party and within the communist state, it's incredibly centralized. It creates incredible paranoia within that political system. And so everyone is essentially killing each other to remain as pigs in the feeding trough, with the slaughter of the middle classes, the slaughter of the economy, as the sacrificial lamb to feed this parasitic political agenda. So it's this is precisely the problem with communism. Essentially, if we're going to make it very simple, it's centralization versus decentralization. It's empire versus local community.
Yeah,
and that is, and so to go
and
back.
So
to
when you make all of it, when you centralize everything, and that power is central, it means that the power is so much more attractive, right?
Yes.
And so it becomes a throne. And
Yes.
then it's a Game of Thrones, like I say. And now the guys are killing their opponents. They're doing whatever they can because you want to get to the throne. And once you're on the throne, no one can dethrone you because you
Yes.
can't be voted out.
Yes.
Which is kind of the opposite of, let's say, like a Swiss direct democracy,
Yes.
where the people decide. And so you come to power, and 2 weeks later, the people say, we don't want you in power anymore. That's it. That's the end of your public service.
Exactly.
But
right.
you're a public servant. You're not a god.
Yes.
You're not a king.
Yes, exactly. And this is where the DA have pursued centralization in the complete face of everything they tell us and tell the voters. They say that, no, we're a federalist party, we believe in decentralization, we believe in low taxes, we believe in reduced bureaucracy and red tape. They talk right, and they run left. They literally, their policies are all of these things. So I've been hammering the DA for almost 20 years now on the Division of Revenue Act. They have done nothing to fight back on the Division of Revenue Act for 20 years. And there are many people within the DA who privately come to me and say, Jack, we agree with you 100%. We are being fleeced. We're being robbed dry.
So this division of income, just quick explanation.
Okay, cool. So the Division of Revenue Act is how much taxes are collected in each province and how the central government then allocates it to the various provinces. To give you the numbers, we haven't got the recent ones yet, but for last year, 2025, the Western Cape paid 325 billion rand to the National Treasury. We got back in unconditional grants, and I'll tell you why that matters, unconditional grants, 75 billion rand.
Well, back of envelope, what's that,
25%? 25%. We're losing 75%. We're losing direct access to 75% of the taxes that we pay. It's mind-blowing.
So if you halved our taxes, we still have double.
Exactly right. Exactly. So this is something that we've been saying. And I could argue that it's even worse than that. Some people like to say, oh, no, but you're not taking into account the national budget, which goes to policing and goes to housing and goes to education and things like that.
Military deterrence.
Exactly. But, well, and hospitals. I go, well, let's look at the police. Let's look at education. Let's look at the hospitals. Let's look at housing. Let's look at all these things which are being implemented, forced down our throats here in the Western Cape, according to ANC-governed national policy, which is now also DA-governed national policy, because they're both together. So
Governments of National Unity.
Government of National Unity. The DA's got to now take responsibility for this. Black economic empowerment is full-on racism against the vast majority of the population of the Western Cape. That's absolutely what it is. The Afrikaans language is the majority language spoken in the Western Cape. We've got Cape Exit Party members in Mitchell's Plain whose kids can't get a proper education because the teachers that are teaching them in Mitchell's Plain are from the Eastern Cape, don't speak Afrikaans, can't communicate with the children properly. They then have a crime happens in the community. They go to the police station. The police sergeants aren't from the local community, can't speak Afrikaans, can't help the communities. You go to the hospitals, same story. So we're basically, this money that is coming in, that comes through on conditional grants, that's simply furthering this racist ANC agenda. So, we can have a whole conversation, and I
just saying 25% comes back, but it's not really 25% that comes back in the way that the local people would prefer to have that money applied.
So an unconditional grant is what we decide how it's spent. So the DA decides how that 25% gets spent. So we don't have an argument with that. We say, okay, good. We pay 325 billion, we get 75 billion back on our unconditional grant. So that 75 billion, the government we voted for, the DA, or people voted for in the Western Cape, the
local
DA,
government,
and provincial, so the Western Cape and the City of Cape Town, etc., that's DA. They spend that 75 billion the way that they want to spend it. They're not dictated to. However, there is another part of the budget that comes back on conditional grants where people say, oh, no, it's not as bad as 75%. And our argument is that, yes, it is that bad. In fact, it could even be worse, because the 25% that we do get back, I am yet to see the DA grow a pair and stand up against the ANC and say, we're not going to implement these racist policies here in the Cape. Yet the DA, lockstep, does whatever the ANC tells them to do. So with that 75 billion that we get back, they're also allocating houses based on BEE policies. They're going along with the ridiculous PI Act. There's a new thing called the Temporary Emergency Accommodation Policy, which might come in pretty soon, and that's going to make the PI Act even worse, where you can have illegal land invaders taking over plots of land. There was a great documentary that was done by Joe Emilio called, what was it now? But anyway, it was the racecourse. What was the racecourse? Anyway, it was the racecourse that was taken over by illegal land invaders, and they literally, you had the police come in there, and you saw the video of them standing on the side, not doing anything, and just a massive mob of people took over private land, built shacks, and now with these laws in place, the government is obliged to build them free housing with free electricity and free water, which you and me pay for, and all Cape Town citizens and taxpayers pay for. It is so mind-blowing, and the DA goes along with it. So you ask me what makes the DA communist. This is what makes the DA communist. There are so many things that the DA could have done over the last 20 years as being the majority party in power of the Western Cape and Cape Town, and pretty much the whole of the Cape. And they've done none of it. Not once have they fought back against the Division of Revenue Act. Not once have they called a referendum. They could call a referendum on anything that they wanted to. The Constitution allows for it. Premiers have the constitutional power to call referendums. But what do we get from the DA when we tell them this? They look for excuses to do nothing. So at the highest levels, when you say you have all of this power, if we had the power that you have, we would have done so much. We would have fought the ANC on the Division of Revenue Act. We would have kept all of those taxes. We would have said, no, I'm sorry, BE doesn't apply in the Western Cape. Coloureds are they were like a 60% majority. Now they probably maybe closer to 49. Afrikaans is spoken by 70+% of the population of the Cape. We're not going to impose education policies, housing policies, employment policies, which discriminate against over two-thirds of the population of the Cape. It's ethnic and cultural cleansing, and the DA have gone along with it. So this is something that we would have fought against, and the DA has done nothing to fight against. Worse than that, when we've approached them, for example, on referendums, because referendums are a key way for people to actually have their voice. That's the point. We're living in a democracy. Let's ask the people what they want. The DA says, oh, no, I'm sorry, the law doesn't allow for it, and we're going to have to, see what else we can do. And they do absolutely nothing. They drag their heels. So this is either an incompetent, in this respect, incompetent when it comes to fighting for the people of the Cape, very competent when implementing socialist policies. So this is a much more concerning political party than the ANC, for example, which you know exactly what you're getting. They're socialist or communist, but they're incompetent. So what do you want? Do you want a socialist communist government that's competent or incompetent?
Yeah, and so if you have that, you have competence pulling in the wrong direction in terms of what the majority of people actually want.
Yes.
That means that it's specifically undemocratic.
Yes.
It's working exactly against what politicians, like as a representative, you're supposed to represent the will of the people.
Yes.
And the people have a will, and like you said, it seems like the DA keeps on acting against that will.
Yes.
And so it'll canvass on one thing, and then actually when they've got the keys, they go exactly the other direction.
Okay.
Tell me, because touched on this idea of communism why is communism bad? And then, like socialism, but isn't socialism just like being nice to your neighbor? Like, what's the premise in terms of the system that you think best works?
Okay, well,
and why?
Okay, well, socialism is a very sneaky word. It's a precursor to communism. So people who say, "Oh, I'm not communist, I'm socialist." Well, it's the half step.
But I mean, it's got the word social in there. Who's not social?
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, it plants the seeds. It's ideological brainwashing. So you get people that get used to being dependent on the state. It's an ideology and a philosophy that creates dependence, weakness, incompetence. It presupposes centralization. It takes from the productive to give to the unproductive. It creates all sorts of incentives which absolutely warp the natural energy of life and growth and beauty and positivity and productivity and self-reliance and all of these things which, that's...
And so if you're dependent enough on the state, then you end up with the state taking away all your freedoms because you can't go against the state because you're dependent on the state.
Absolutely.
And so making you dependent is part of the... It's a feature, not a bug.
And then you're not free. Then you're not a free sovereign human being anymore. Now you're someone that has to vote for that socialist communist government because otherwise you don't get your SASSA grant. And if you work for the government, you've got to be very polite and nice to whoever your overlords are because otherwise you lose your job. So we have one of the biggest government workforces in the world in South Africa. The government employs huge amounts of people. And essentially they know what they're doing. These people have to essentially vote for them. They've created, and the education system is so bad, and I think it's intentionally so bad. And another part of communism is there has to be an enemy. So the ideology of hatred and envy and jealousy and anger and violence, these are all hallmarks of communism, hallmarks of socialism. It's the basis behind it is envy and hatred. So they need to create an enemy, and we saw this happen in Zimbabwe. Even you had less than 1% of the population being blamed for everything that...
All the maladies.
Exactly. And we saw what happened in Zimbabwe. And what's so crazy, we've had Ramaphosa and Malema saying that, no, we think that Zimbabwe is a good example to follow. People just need to... You don't need to do anything else than actually take them on their word. They're telling us what they want to do. The problem with the DA is that they say, oh, no, we believe in federalism, but then they go along with everything that the ANC is pushing. So people need to be smart, and there's not much time left. So if people are going to vote for the DA again in the elections at the end of this year, they're going to be in big trouble. We're all going to be in big trouble because the DA has not shown any strength, any will to go against the crux of ANC policy. So we need to, if people want to see the country take a tack and shift in the right direction, the DA have proven themselves over the last 2 decades as to, yes, good people within the DA, not taking that away. However, what matters is the policy on the ground. And here, for the last 5 years, the work that the Cape Exit Party's been doing on the ground, it is scary. The amount of community meetings that I've been to where the City of Cape Town, read DA, holds public participation processes about, for example, let's talk about the Masiphumelele LSDF in the Deep South. They want to expand the Masiphumelele squatter camp from its current occupancy is about 42,000 economic migrants. I looked at 2 different reports. One said 50% unemployment. The other one said 72% unemployment, if you can believe that. So imagine, you've got 42,000 people. Anyone who knows Cape Town, go to the Deep South, this beautiful Cape Peninsula, one of the most beautiful places on earth. You've got a 42,000 squatter camp there with up to 70% unemployment. How is that economically viable? So now already you've got at least half, if not 2/3 of this community without work, Crime is a massive issue in the peninsula as a result of this. And the DA is pushing forward a Masiphumelele LSDF, which is going to expand. They're going to build free houses, provide free electricity, and give free water, and take land to build these houses, which is going to increase the capacity from 42,000 currently to over 110,000 over the next 10 years.
But why?
So, you would think this.
Do they think? I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of the DA. Do they think that by welcoming people from other provinces who aren't necessarily arriving with skill sets that are needed or useful, now you said very high levels of unemployment, do they think that these people will look kindly on them in the election and vote for them, or what? Like, I don't understand the political action of it. Or is it just to play nicely?
And that is the exact answer that we often get from people. It is so mind-blowing because they see the DA as something different to what the DA actually is, because they see the councillor who they went to school with and is a good person and wouldn't agree with this stuff. But the answer I sometimes get is like, oh, well, we've got to do it because of national policy. If we don't do it, well, then the national government's going to take that land anyway, and they're going to do their own thing with it, so we might as well do it first. These are the types of answers that one kind of gets, and it doesn't, none of it really makes sense. And you've also got to appreciate that people in politics, for a number of them, this is a job. So they do what they're told. Boss tells them, okay, these are the policies, you've got to implement them. But I say you've got to take a much broader philosophical view if you want to understand what the hell is going on. And I was not a fan of the lockdowns 5-6 years ago. I wasn't a fan of the forced vaccinations.
Same here.
This is ridiculous because of the principle of freedom. Okay, do I own my body? Am I a sovereign individual? You're telling me the government can force a needle inside of you, tell you cannot work until you take an experiment in your arm? I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. But the DA?
We had Nuremberg.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There were 7 doctors were hung for
100%.
For not having informed consent from their patients.
Exactly. So the DA and the ANC and everyone all went along with that in lockstep. So people need to draw their own conclusions, but perhaps the DA isn't run by the members of the DA. Perhaps the DA gets its orders from elsewhere. Perhaps there are things...
Commercial entity, international, something, WEF, who knows?
Who knows? But let's... People can speculate all they want, but let's actually look at the ground. What are you getting? You vote DA, you get a DA majority. What types of policies do you get implemented? If you were to switch your vote from the DA to the Cape Exit Party, this is what we will do. For 5 years, I got thrown out. I saw that video of council for the things that we say, because we're fighting them on all of these issues, and we upset a lot of people by what we say, but it needs to be said. So we will, if we had the power that the DA has, and let me also say that we don't even need to have that level of power. We just need to get the DA underneath 50%. So currently they're sitting on around 55%.
In the Western Cape.
In the Western Cape. If we can get them down to, let's say, 45%, and the Cape Exit Party has got 3%, and the Freedom Front has got 3%, and the ACDP's got 3%, etc. All of us together, we can come together, and we can go to the DA and we can say, okay, look, we'll give you the majority, but certainly the Cape Independence Party requirement would be that we'll give you the majority only if you give the people of Cape Town and the people of the Western Cape referendums on keeping more of our taxes, providing employment to people that were born in the Cape, giving protections to the Afrikaans language, providing housing to all of these things that can be addressed on a national level. All they need to do is get a mandate from the people, because from a legal point of view, this could go all the way to the Constitutional Court. no court will be able to turn down a mandate from a referendum. This is a very difficult thing to do. So when the DA says, oh, we would love to do that, we'd love to fight better for you, but the ANC, still is the biggest party, so we've got to listen to them. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. I'm sorry. They can use the laws that we have in force currently, and they can fight back a hell of a lot harder than they have been doing, and that is exactly what we would do. So our hope is that the DA drops below 50% and that voters give us the balance of power so we can force the DA to be a better party. And I can guarantee you will see, I don't know what the number is, let's say 30, 40, 50% of DA members themselves will support what I'm saying here right now. We will have a lot of support from members, and it's going to be much easier if you don't have a dictatorship DA that's sitting on 55%. It's much easier for that dictator party to say, you councillor so and so, I'm sorry, we're firing you and we're bringing in a new councillor who is going to do what we tell you to do. Because we got 55% and no one can stop us. So they're literally an unaccountable power for 5 years. So we get an opportunity once every 5 years to hold these people account, and but getting them underneath 50%, then we can hold them to account every single day. Because now at 45%, if people step out of line, you can have by-elections in different wards. You can put a much more pressure on them to be a better party, and obviously being at 45% and being in partners with ourselves and other parties similar to ourselves. Although I would argue that there is no party that is more of a middle finger to the system than us. I mean, and I've got good relationships with a number of other parties out there and a lot of respect for them, and we work well together. But I would argue that the Cape Independence Party, if people want to say enough is enough and we need to change the system and take a tack towards good economic policies, good political policies, decentralization, federalism, and then ultimately, if those things don't succeed in solving the problems that we have, the final step would be a referendum on Cape Independence. But that is something that I would like to talk about also, is that a vote for the Cape Independence Party doesn't necessarily mean Cape Independence. If people...
Yeah, no, so because I wanted to go in this direction, because I know a lot of people say, but... if you don't vote for the DA, then essentially you're voting for the ANC, because anything else you do is just throwing your vote away. But I think you kind of went through the mechanics here of explaining that you don't need for... Obviously, there's some kind of threshold. If only two people vote for you and you don't get a seat at all, then you can argue that those two votes may have been wasted. But if nothing else, it just means that it gives you a voice at the table for the ruling of the Western Cape.
Yes.
And the bigger that is, the stronger the influence.
Yes.
And these are the kind of influences that push towards this idea of Western democratic understanding.
Yes.
Property rights, being held to account, freedom of the individual.
Yes. Exactly.
And economic freedom fighters, EFF, it's an interesting name because I think that they're actually working in exactly the opposite. But real economic freedom, the ability to trade unhampered, and you're saying like BEE rules and so on, being able to say like, no, wait, you should decide for yourself. If it's your business, you decide what the composition of that business should be. Like, who do you need? And if those people all happen to be Chinese, then that's your business. Right? Like it shouldn't be a central government's concern or issue to decide how you do your business.
Yes.
Unless what you do is radically illegal and bad for society or the environment.
Yeah, well, one should have a Bill of Rights that, there's certain things that are just, completely protected and no-go areas. So that's why you have the judicial system, and you also want to have competing centers of power. So you need a good judiciary, and you need a strong middle class. In fact, that's the greatest counterbalance to corruption, because civic society is the most effective at ensuring that things are smooth. The middle classes and civic society do things 10 times better than any government official or any charity or anything like that. Civic society Well, good charities. You get different types. But so just to hit on this point that a lot of people don't understand. And when I've asked people, they've been so brainwashed by the DA that says, oh, if you don't vote DA, the ANC is going to get in. You have to vote DA to keep the ANC out. I asked them, okay.
And it's sort of like the ANC saying, if you don't vote for the ANC, then apartheid's going to come back.
Exactly.
It's just fear-mongering.
Exactly.
But most people seem to fall for it.
They seem to fall for it, which is quite crazy. Because then I asked them, I say, okay, well, do you know what the ANC and the EFF got in the city of Cape Town in the last elections? Do you know what the ANC and EFF got in the Western Cape in the last elections?
Okay, now you have to tell me.
Okay. So when I ask people this question, I get the number of like, okay, so we got the local elections coming up at the end of this year. So in the last elections, what did the DA get? What did the ANC get? And they know that the DA won it with just over 50%, so around 55%. And they go, well, I think the ANC got around 40% or something like that. And then they think, well, the EFF probably got the rest. This is what they think. In the last elections, the ANC got 18%. 18. The DA got 55, the ANC got 18, and the EFF got 4.
So it's 22%.
22%.
Is that Western Cape or Cape Town?
That was Cape Town.
That was Cape Town.
But it's kind of similar numbers across the province. But the ANC and the EFF together, and then the next party that you could call African Nationalist, Communist, maybe the PAC. We're talking about fractions of percent.
MK
and MK wasn't around back then, but even then the MK doesn't perform very well. Here in the Western Cape. And they're also eating from ANC vote. So what we're seeing over the last 20 years, the ANC and the EFF and parties like that have never broken. I mean, like I said, they got 22% in the last election together. All together, they got 22%. The best that they've kind of done is just over 30%. So we're dealing with a non-issue. This political threat that the DA tells everyone, oh, you got to be careful of the ANC and the EFF. Well, they got 18 and 4% in the last election, 22% in total. They're not even in the game. Your concern as a voter is how much the DA gets. We know the DA is going to be the biggest party, but are they going to be the biggest party with 51% or 41%? Or 35%, whatever it is, they're always going to be the biggest party. So all the people who love the DA, they can sleep easy. The DA will be the biggest party. But if you want to see the DA become a better party, a much better party, in fact, flip 180 degrees and become the party that they thought they were voting for, they need to make sure the DA gets underneath 50%. Because only at that point can we then put pressure on them. And why they should vote for the Cape Independence Party, even if they don't believe in Cape Independence, what you do is, if you want decentralization, if you want less taxes, if you want federalism, if you want local community control over your areas, etc., if you aim for the stars and you land on the moon, that's still a win. So we're always going to be fighting for Cape Independence. We believe that the system is so broken in South Africa that only Cape Independence can fix it. So we have that gun on the table. We have that ace card up our sleeve. That is what we can threaten the ANC and the national government with. No one has any threats that the ANC can take seriously. We have a legitimate threat there, and the Zulus can also do it. And I think that's why they have so much power. The Zulu kingdom has got so much power, and they have threatened the ANC. They said, no, if you push us too far, we're going to make KwaZulu-Natal an independent country. So what we need to do is grow a spine here in the Western Cape and do what the Zulus are doing and say, listen, we're also going to make the Western Cape an independent country unless you do what we tell you. That's it. We don't need to become independent, but we must at least threaten it. Threaten independence. And then if you want to stay a part of unitary South Africa, fine. Say, we can make the Cape independent if we want to. We've got the majority. We've had a referendum. People want to do it. But you know what? It's okay. We'll stay a part of this, we think, a fake Rainbow Nation. We think the Rainbow Nation has been long dead under the ANC. But if people still think that we can have a Rainbow Nation under these types of people which govern us, fine. Let's stay part of unitary South Africa. But let's get rid of BEE in the Western Cape. Let's keep more of our taxes. Let's protect the Afrikaans language, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, like you say, aim for the stars, hit the moon. Yeah, I quite. As I said earlier, like I don't necessarily agree with 100% of everything that you say, but I do see the need for, the sense of freedom, a sense of the individual having abilities to move, and I feel like there's certain places in the world. I look at Europe, for instance, and it feels like the EU sort of centralized a lot of what happened, and then that thing becomes taken over by some other entity, some kind of dark monster or whatever, and it feels like now you're going in the wrong direction. And even for places like Western Europe, where they've actually been first world for a long time, there's lots of money, there's lots of education, healthcare, everything, but it feels like they're moving in the wrong direction. And what I see is that we have to be careful, even though, and I think this is what you were saying earlier, the Western Cape looks great. You compare Cape Town to Johannesburg or Bloemfontein or Durban, and you just realize, it actually looks great here. The roads work, the traffic lights work, most of the services work. Okay, so wonderful, we're in Shangri-La. But if you look more carefully, you see that we are heading in the wrong direction. And a lot of that is ideological. And you were saying it's actually, it seems like ideological capture of the DA, that within its ranks it's got lots of people who actually want to fight the good fight, right? They want to make sure that the Western Cape moves in the right direction. But they don't have the option. They're not given the option because there's some kind of central control in the party that keeps on picking left, picking far left, picking socialist the whole time.
Yeah.
And if we don't fight against that, then obviously it's like the frog in the boiling water, right? There's no point where you go, oh shit, now they've gone too far. It's like, well, they've gone too far long ago, and they keep on going further. And you need, in any political system, you need resistance. You need to put resistance up to disallow power to centralize, because it always wants to.
Yes.
Right? And once it's centralized, it wants to grow the government and make the government bigger and bigger until the government runs everything. And the reality is the government can't run everything. It's the most inefficient way of running anything. And so you need to fight against that tendency. And I think that's what you guys, even if, like you said, even if someone doesn't agree with the idea of the Cape breaking away from the rest of the country, to at least say, yes, but there are a whole bunch of things on the way there that you might agree with.
Yes.
And if it really went all the way there, that would mean a referendum, right? Like ultimately. And that's not necessarily where we'll end up. But you have to find the ways to put a foot against some of the tendencies that otherwise seem to just slip in one direction.
Yes, and I mean, I went to school in the Eastern Cape. I was in Grahamstown, and the rest of South Africa was really in great shape, and there's some fantastic black commentators that talk about, what the Eastern Cape was like, and KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. I mean, oh goodness, you see some of the photos of Johannesburg and what it is like now, just in a matter of 30, 40 years. So people need to realize that the ship is sinking, and it's sinking fast. And this place that we call home it's unique to the world, and we have an opportunity to save it now. And just doing more of the same is not going to do that. Doing more of the same is going to mean that your children and grandchildren are not going to have a future here. If they do, it's going to be a very bleak one, or they're going to have to find somewhere else to survive. But things are getting very, very bad in this country, and we're simply providing a peaceful and legal solution to this problem. And exactly like you said, Cape independence may not be the ultimate goal. We think it is the best goal and the best solution, but in our pursuit of that, we're not going to go from where we currently are at about 1% of the vote in the Cape to being 51% of the vote. That's not going to happen overnight. So if people can give us the support that we need to get us to 3, 4, 5%, that is a...
Sort of help you be kingmaker.
Absolutely.
And apply that pressure.
Apply that pressure to make sure that we do get more decentralization, more federalism, that we do keep more of our taxes, that we do fight back against a lot of these racist policies. So it's definitely a vote for Cape independence is a vote for a better Cape. And no one is more custom built to fight for the best interests of the Cape than the Cape Independence Party. We don't stand in elections outside of the Western Cape. We are custom built. We're 100% built in the Cape to fight for the Cape's best interest.
So no aspirations for national seat?
No, sure. Obviously, we would, as a natural fact of getting seats in the Western Cape provincial legislature, we would then naturally get seats in the national legislature. So we certainly will contest nationally, but we, unlike, for example, other very good parties which we support, like the ACDP and the Freedom Front, those are parties that have a heavy support base outside of the Western Cape. For example, I think the Freedom Front gets 93% of its votes outside of the Western Cape. I'm not sure what the ACDP split is. The DA gets 70% of its vote outside of the Western Cape. So these parties are obligated to fight different battles than we're obligated to. We're obligated to fight one battle and one battle alone, and that is the best interest of the people of the Cape.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in terms of Cape independence. It's I don't feel like we sort of started this idea of like, tell me about your childhood, and you're like, yeah, my dad used to talk about politics and stuff. So anyway, let's get back into the.
There's just so much. It's so important. We're at a real turning point. I mean, the world's in complete flux, and I think I guess it's just really important. I mean, growing up in Cape Town, seeing how much Cape Town has deteriorated from when I was a child, hearing my father's stories about the way things were, in the 60s and 70s, and then I obviously experienced Cape Town through the 80s and 90s, and then the first time that I was mugged, me and my best friend, we were in boarding school in Grahamstown, and so we were about 14 years old, and this guy, cornered us down a side alley and took out a screwdriver and, told us to give him everything that we had. And then coming back to Cape Town, in the midterm holidays, I just saw rubbish starting to appear in the street. And Cavendish Square, me and my friends, we would go down. I was at Western Province Prep School, and we would go down and have coffee at one of the places there in Cavendish Square. And we were 11, 12, 13 years old, and we would walk from the school down. It was maybe like a 15-minute walk. And from 13, 14, 15, 16, I saw how much Cape Town changed. And, then mugged again when I was 17, came back from Grahamstown, finished off my schooling at Bishop's, and I was mugged there. This time the guy had a gun. I actually managed to get away. My other friends were caught. It was in a subway. And then when I was at UCT, studying at UCT, these two guys were mugging my next door. I heard screaming outside. I was studying for exams at the time. This would have been 2003. And I came out with a baseball bat, wanting to help her. And one guy was standing by the car, so I grabbed him. I said, what's going on? And then I looked up the road and saw my neighbor on the ground screaming with a guy with a gun, over him. And he saw me and I saw him simultaneously. So I just pushed this guy and ran to get back inside, and then just heard the gunshot go off and the bullet hit the wall about 5 meters from where I was standing. And so, my mother was actually inside at the time, and we had a slam lock gate, so I was stuck ringing the doorbell, waiting for this guy to come around and put a second bullet in me. So those things really affected me, and I think when you
sort of realize, is this really necessary? Is this
Yeah.
inevitable? Should we just allow things to devolve and fall apart?
Yeah. So I think from being 11, 12 years old, being able to walk the streets, I would visit my friends, we'd bunk out at night and, steal the bikes from our parents and go gallivant wherever. To then, mug 14, 16, shot at 21 years old, 20 years old. I think those things definitely, because they're all manifestations of a broader problem. When your economy's crashing, when you've got the largest population group in Cape Town who can't get a job because they're not the right skin color. Gangsterism on the Cape Flats is a direct result of ANC policy and DA policy. It's a direct result of that.
Okay, but go into that.
Well, so if you can't put food on the table, if you can't pay your rent, if you can't economically sustain your family, but because all the police officers in your community have come here from the Eastern Cape and taken your jobs, you can't get a job as a teller in the Pick n Pay or the Checkers in your own community, you can't be a teacher in your own community, and all your jobs are being replaced by people that are coming here from other parts of South Africa who don't even speak the language that you were raised and born with. How do you look after your kids? How do you look after your elderly mother? What do? The simplest option is to join a gang and sell drugs. So gangsterism is a direct result of the economic impact of ANC's black economic empowerment and how it's discriminated and prejudiced the people of the Cape. So, and that spills off, and that's why crime is out of control. And it's heartbreaking. But as soon as you fix the economic policies, as soon as you fix the political policies, as soon as you decentralize power down to local communities, kids start getting a proper education so that they can become productive members of society when they turn 16, 17, 18 years old, go into the workforce. We're a big fan of the apprenticeship education system. And so under those types of common sense economic policies, political policies, we would see the Cape lift. Lee Kuan Yew took Singapore as a muddied island in the 1960s to being one of the strongest economies in the world, highest incomes per capita in the world. So we need to stop looking at Cuba and all these communist examples. Or like, how do we actually want the country to work? Well, let's look at the best political system, Switzerland. Let's look at some of the best economies, which were also suffered under colonialism, like Singapore, like Hong Kong. Let's look at what they did and let's learn from them. Good economic policies like Singapore and Hong Kong have introduced. I'm not a fan.
Open your markets.
Open your markets, lower your taxes, remove the red tape, allow entrepreneurs to run businesses without the interference of the government, etc., etc. All of the things. Look at what Singapore, look what Hong Kong did. I'm not such a fan of their political policies, which is why we prefer Switzerland. So a hybrid of Singapore's economic policies and Switzerland's political policies.
Direct
democracy, referendums, initiatives, recall, nullification, and voluntary secession. You have those 5 mechanisms in place. The government will forever be your slave. Those 5 mechanisms, you keep a government accountable to you.
And keep them on their toes.
Yeah, because you have a referendum, you have an election whenever you want. They're not locked in every 5 years like it is under a representative democracy. A direct democracy, you can have elections whenever you want. If the government's really pissing you off, you guys, you recall those politicians and you throw them in jail if they've committed crimes. So you at least get them out of government. So with those political mechanisms in place, we would be a for away.
Oh, it sounds like fun. I think one of my it's something that we've kept from apartheid era, exchange control. Maybe for people who don't know what that's about, you're only allowed to take so much money out of the country per year. And there are only a couple of countries, relatively few countries in the world that have those kind of mechanisms. And if you go look at who they are, then they don't make great neighbors, in terms of face, right? Like you're not looking like the kind of country that's...
Yeah.
Because it shows an insecurity.
Yes.
And I've thought, it's very simple. If I want to, let's say I'm an American multi-billionaire, and I think, hey, it'd be great, let's go to South Africa and put some money in. I get here and suddenly they force me to be BEE compliant, like to comply with these RDP kind of mechanisms that are in place, first of all. Then when I actually do business here and I make money, I can't take the money out again.
Exactly.
So I'm not going to bring the money in the first place.
Exactly.
Right? So it's such a stupid, it feels like
So
these stupid mechanisms that are actually, these are things that could really unlock potential and wealth generation in
Yes.
South Africa. And somehow we're just too scared. Like we're just sort of holding on to these.
I don't know if the
No,
common...
it's like chaining your wife in the kitchen. Like, chaining her up because you're scared she's going to leave you. Guess what? She's not going to love you anymore. Like, it's just one of those things, right?
Exactly. I don't know if these socialists are so clueless, the ANC and the DA. I mean, and just to add to that, yes, I agree 100%. I mean, who is going to invest R1 billion or $1 billion into your country if you're going to lock them and say, oh, you're only allowed to take 10 million rand out? Of course, no one's going to do that. It's absolutely insane. So agree with that one, 100%. And let's look at what assets that we have, especially here in the Cape. We're the Cape of Good Hope. We are one of the few, and now with everything that's going on in the world, we are one of the few places in the world where the sea routes have to pass by us. If there's any issues in
the Suez Canal
with the Suez Canal or Panama or whatever it might be, the Cape of Good Hope, the tip here in Cape Town, has the potential to be one of the most prosperous ports in the world. And I mean, you just speak to businessmen and anyone that tries to import or export through our ports, it is a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. It costs a fortune. It's incompetent. There's delays. It's inefficient.
And it has that tendency of bureaucracy just to build up and become more complex or more complicated every year and more messy. And it should really be going in the other direction, because if you unlock those wealth creation mechanisms, rising tide.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, look at Hong Kong, look at Singapore. I mean, it's just literally, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know what works economically. Let's just do it and get out of this poverty and out of this crime-ridden, bureaucratic, incompetent state that we find ourselves in. Let's just do it. Let's just cut the cancer out and get on our way and build a beautiful future for our kids.
Well, on that cheerful note. No, I mean, I think it's easy to sort of get despondent about this stuff and say, rising crime and rising this problem and that and what's happening in the world and, oh, whoa, there's no hope. I think there's always lots of hope.
Absolutely.
Right? There are lots of things we can do, and there's so much potential. And we want to try and sort of take level of responsibility and do what we can to, in your own life, to make your own life better. Eat more healthy, exercise a little bit, work on your mental health. Don't doom scroll the whole time. Be in charge, have that agency, that sense of agency about your own life. But then also in terms of communities, be involved with your community in terms of ultimately get to sort of, politics, like actually really go think who's going to make a difference and in what kind of direction are we going, and is that actually what I want? Is that what I want for my kids and my grandkids? Instead of just trying to sort of not shake the boat. Like you said, if it's busy sinking, then you should be making noise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think, the message that the Cape Independence Party brings is a message of hope. It's absolutely, I think it's the most exciting, beautiful message of hope. It's people just need to maybe think out the blocks, remove the blinkers, don't fall for the fear and the propaganda that the DA and the ANC dishes out. And the power is in their hands. And with their help, we can make the Cape of Good Hope a place of hope and opportunity, peace and prosperity again.
I dig that. If people are looking for more information or maybe feel like they want to be part of this mission, do something to that effect, where can they find you? I also want to disambiguate quickly, because I got confused at some point, because you already have sort of a double barrel name, which the Cape Independence Party and Cape Exit or Cape Exit or Cape Brexit. but there's also a referendum party and other things, and I kind of got confused at some point to know like which one's which. Where do we stand?
Okay, so
What am I looking for on the box to know that I'm getting the real deal here?
well, fortunately, everything is cleared up. So everything's nice and smooth now. There were issues in the past, which might require a whole nother interview, but it's not necessary to get into it. But basically, the referendum party no longer exists. They've been dissolved into the Freedom Front, and then the group, the CIAG, with Phil Craig, he has basically said that they're in a partnership, pushing self-determination with the Freedom Front. Or the Freedom Front has said that their angle is self-determination, not Cape independence, which is fine. Self-determination also is a win. It's also something that we're fighting for, and it's a step towards Cape independence. But as far as Cape independence is concerned, it's really simple. There's only one political party that stands for Cape independence, and that's the Cape Independence Party, and our abbreviation is Cape Exit. And so the Cape Exit Party, as well as civic organizations such as Cape Exit NPO, such as ULA, such as various. We're in talks with certain Khoisan groups that are very exciting. We're looking forward to seeing how things develop on that front. There's a lot of civic organizations that we work with that are in favor of Cape independence, or at least self-determination. So we're working closely with all of those different groups. And like I said, we have good partnerships with other political parties like the Freedom Front, like the ACDP. But as far as Cape independence is concerned, there's only us left. We're the last one standing. We've been doing it for 19 years. It's been a tough battle. And in fact, I started the Cape Independence Party in 2007, but even for many years before that, like I said, my family was involved in politics, leaning in that direction.
So, Jack, where would people find like your website, your social media, where sort of know what you're busy with and see and potentially contribute or jump in and come do some work with you or just learn more?
So it's an election year. The elections are most likely going to be in November. So we absolutely invite everyone who wants to get involved and who would like a better future for their children or for themselves, for their businesses, even people living in other parts of South Africa. If you guys want to move down to Cape Town, move down to the Cape and help us fight this battle, we extend an open invitation. Please go to the website, www.capeexitparty.com. As you said, Donnie, CAPEXIT, party, one word, capeexitparty.com. And all of our information's on there. You can send us an email. Otherwise, join our Facebook page, Cape Independence Party Cape Exit, or find us at on Twitter X, Cape Exit Party.
Excellent. I was thinking about going the Ludwig von Mises human action route to explain libertarianism and the economic thinking behind that, and how you got to where you did. But I suppose we also could have gone in a million different directions here.
I think this was great. I think we said very important things that needed to be said. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Donnie, for what you do and creating this platform. And it's a really brilliant platform that you're building. And I'd love to join you here again at some point if possible.
Oh, I'm sure we will do so.
Lovely.
Jack Miller, thank you very much for being on the Dan Flow today.